Oh, Rob here. So, introduction to component 3. You're all doing the short film option, so I'm not going to bother with the screenplay bit. This is just for short films. Right, so what have we got to do? For the short film option, you need to make a 4 to 5 minute long short film. That's marked out of 40 marks. And to go with that, you've got a written evaluation of 1600 to 1800 words is marked out of 20 marks. So, in total, this is going to be 30% of your A-level. So, the production is worth 20% of your A-level, and the analysis is worth 10. You've got to have your full production, that's worth 40, your evaluation, which is 20. Production cover sheet, which lists all the short films you studied and analysed. It's got to have key stages, checklists throughout the year where I check the work you've done, sign it, you sign it. It's also got to have on it all the information about the people that helped you, things like that, so that we can see that it's your own work. So you've got to sign it, stuff like that, and say, yep, it's all mine, I didn't nick it off anybody else. Now, for the filming option, the individual learner, i.e. you, must be responsible for the camera work and the editing of the film. So you are going to be stood behind the camera, you are going to be filming it. You are going to be editing it. Now you can get people to help you. So unassessed participants may act in or appear in the film. Their performance will not be assessed. You are not allowed to act in the film because you have to be filming it. So there's no explicit requirement for independent lighting or independent sound, but you can get unassessed assistants to help you operate the lighting and or sound equipment, if either is required, providing they do this under your direction. Now, you are allowed to use some material that you haven't done yourself. So you can use a soundtrack from existing sources, so music or music from a film. You can use, provided it's appropriately acknowledged on the relevant form and used for educational purposes only. However, if you want my advice, I highly recommend that you use copyright-free music. Okay? Better yet, write it yourself. If you can play an instrument or you do music tech, do your own music. I highly recommend that. Failing that, there are plenty of websites where you can go and find stock music, but either way, you've got to correctly reference it. If you use outside educational purposes envisaged, like you're thinking of putting it up on YouTube or something like that, then you've got to follow their copyright rules, which is another good reason to use copyright-free music. You may use up to 10 seconds, absolute maximum of 10 seconds of found visual material if it's integral to a genre-based film extract. So that could be shots or that you've been possible to film otherwise, or found footage like a news extract. If you're going to use this, however, it doesn't count to your 5-minute long length. Okay? If you are going to use any footage that you didn't film, you've got to properly reference it and say where you got it from. I would recommend against this unless you absolutely have to. As I said, try to use copyright-free material where possible. If you're going to do a genre-based extract, i.e. like you're doing sci-fi or horror or something, you know, try to avoid using found footage if you can. Try not to have anything that's impossible for you to film. Easy solve there, isn't it? Easy fix. As I said, right, you've got to have a short film of between 4 and 5 minutes. It has to include one of the following: a narrative twist, a narrative that begins with an enigma, a narrative that establishes and develops a single character, and a narrative that portrays a conflict between two central characters. Of course, you might argue that how you can have a narrative twist and not have an enigma is another question. Again, doesn't mean to say that a narrative that establishes a single character or that has a conflict between two characters might not have an enigma or a twist. But you need to pick which of these is going to be the core of your story. Eventually you've got to do an evaluative analysis. As I said, it's 1600 or 1800 words. It's got to be based on at least 3 of the short films we've studied, and those short films must add up to 18 minutes. And you're going to analyse how these short films that you have watched and studied influenced your film. So it's a good idea to really consider the evaluation before you actually start filming, so that you've got something to talk about in your evaluation, and you've addressed these issues before you even start writing it, okay? So when you're coming up with a narrative for your short film, think about how your narrative links to the narratives of the short films you've studied, okay? So think about the narrative structure, think about narrative theory, think about people like Todorov, think about Pam Cook, think about people like, well, especially binary opposites, Claude Levi-Strauss, you know, if you're going to do conflict, obviously, right? So consider all of these things, how you're going to construct your narrative through dialogue, what are the key ideas that have informed your production that you've got from other short movies, okay? So think about how they've influenced you. Again, cinematic influences. Now, they can be the short films that you've looked at, but they can also be feature films. And consider very carefully, before you start planning your film, how are you going to use film language, and that means cinematography, mise-en-scène, editing and sound, to create meaning for the spectator, and how that relates to the way in which those techniques are used in some of the films that you've studied. Okay, so for example, you might like the way in which Connect uses shallow depth of field and bokeh, and you might want to use that in your short film, even if your short film is radically different to Connect. So, throughout the course of your study, you've got to research and plan this film. Now, the research and planning is not getting marked. It doesn't count towards your final grade. But if you don't do it, your life's going to be a lot harder when it comes to making your film. Okay? Now, you're expected to keep an unassessed portfolio. Now, you've got to ask, if they're not going to mark it, what's the point? Well, you can't make a short film unless you know what a short film looks like. You can't, make a short film if you don't know what characters are and what cinematography and mise-en-scène and editing and sound is, if you've not got any influences. You can't make a short film if you don't plan it properly, because it will all go pear-shaped, okay? So you want to keep some kind of diary. Now, that could be paper-based. I frankly would prefer paper-based because it makes it an awful lot easier for me to mark. But it could be a blog. It could be I recommend Blogger because that comes free with Google. Or it could be a Pinterest page, for example. A variety of these. There are plenty of websites that help you organize all this kind of stuff. You can go find one of them, but you want to be making notes on visuals from short films. That's why I got you to analyze those short films, right? Make notes on the visuals of the short films you've looked at. You can do Pinterest boards of shots that you've been inspired by. It could have notes about ideas for characters and ideas for narratives. You can have, again, a Pinterest mood board of cinematography, mise-en-scène, editing and sound from short films and feature films you liked. And for the screenplay option, it could be notes on screenplays. You're going to need a script even if you do a film. Alright, so you want to write one of them anyway. As I said, the evaluative analysis must make specific reference to at least 80 minutes worth of short films from that list you were given, and you have to have at least 3 films minimum. So if the 3 films that you have picked don't add up to 80 minutes, you need to do more films until they do. Okay? Even if 2 of the films you've picked add up to more than 80 minutes, you still have to do a 3rd one. So, that gives you a brief rundown of what the course involves. Okay? I will be providing this PowerPoint and the actual sheet from the exam board explaining what the course is. And if you've got any questions, you know where I am. I will talk to you later.